Nope.
It just no.
Okay. Hey, Dick, can you hear me? Room light there.
Anybody here?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
Mark?
What's that?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, I'm muted.
Can you hear it now? No, it's muted now.
Yeah, I hear somebody.
Well, the speaker's muted.
Yeah.
I
Well, you
want
just
the
can't
mic.
hear.
How do we mute this mic? And
Welcome to WebEx. Enter your access code or meeting number followed by pound.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're about ready to begin. If you don't mind muting your phones, your microphones, I think I got everybody else pretty much muted. If you have a question, feel free to unmute and ask at any point in time. If I'm going too fast or you want to see something again or some better explanation of something, feel free. My name's Clinton Rowland. I'm one of the field engineers here at BK Technologies. And today we're going to learn about RES and using Microsoft Excel. So I'm going to try to break down how Res uses Excel and then maybe give you guys some tips on how to use Excel, and we're going to make a code plug. So first and foremost, I'm going to make some assumptions here. I'm going to assume that you understand how to use Res and some basic understanding principles. We're going to cover both conventional and trunking. If you're a conventional only user, some of the trunking stuff obviously is not going to pertain to you, but if you're a trunking user, it'll be very interesting as well. So normally we get things that look like this. Whether this comes from a competitor's code plug that we've copied and pasted, or if we have users or different templates. There's 101 ways to display the same thing, but normally we get a spreadsheet that looks something like this, where we get a zone and a zone name, and then we will get our channels and how they're configured on a spreadsheet. So today we're going to transfer this spreadsheet here into something that works on Res. So here you see I've got Res 5.5.3. This also works great in 5.5.5 and 5.5.9. And those are the recommended versions of Res. 5.5.9 is the ultimate version that I recommend that you use. So first and foremost, to do an export, you'll go up to File, Export, and Export Parameters to Excel. I don't recommend that you build a code plug in Excel and then import it in from scratch. What I recommend that you do is build yourself a template in Res, export that template, modify that template, and then import it back in. And this will become more clear once we get into this. So you see that when I select export, it gives me a wide variety of things that I can export. I can export conventional main menu, I can export buttons, I can export conventional settings, system settings, list set settings, and our zone channel assignment. When we're doing import and export with Excel, there's two types of parameters that we can modify. We can modify what I would call a value parameter. For example, a frequency is a value parameter. And then there's also like what you could call selectable or on-off parameters. So these are parameters that are turned on and off. So for example, if I close this here, on display change. So that's an on or an off for the backlight. The on-off or selectables are much easier to do using the Res UI to do that and not using import-export with Excel. Where the import-export with Excel shines really brightly is with values. Now, if you remember, when I went to export parameters to Excel, I have systems and then I have list sets. So to describe that, we'll go here to our system. So here's our system information. Everything on this tab is our system information. Everything here on the right, these are list sets. Now, if I have a list set that's empty, for example, this UID list, it's empty. So when I go to do an export, it's not going to export anything because it's empty. So we need to have a template. So let's first begin by adding ourselves a trunking system. And I'm going to go ahead and set the ID to the trunking system ID that we're using. It's just a dummy ID. By the way, all the frequencies and talk group IDs here are pretty much bogus. The only real frequencies are the vcall frequencies are real, and the weather frequencies down here are real. Everything else here is pretty much bogus and made up. If it looks like it's yours or something along those lines, that's purely accidental, I promise. I even Googled the most popular town names, and number 1 and number 2 was like Salem and Franklin. So this is all bogus and made up, but it's very indicative of what I see very often when I'm making code plugs. So here I've got my trunking system created, and then what I'm going to do is under control channels, I'm going to add a row, close it. Under talk groups, I'm going to add a row, close it. And under sites, I'm going to add a row, close it. That way, when I export the trunking list sets, it's going to export my control channels, my talk groups, and my sites. And what you'll see is it won't export my unit call list because I have nothing there. It won't export my channel identifier table because I have nothing there. It's just going to export what I have listed. So moving on, the next thing I need to do is I'm going to make myself a template in my zone channel assignment. So I'm going to add my conventional and trunking channels. When you're doing this, it makes it really easy to do this if you have dual monitors. So if you have more than one monitor, it makes it really easy to see what's going on, because what you're going to end up having is you're going to having one spreadsheet. This is your source documentation open, and then you're going to have the exported spreadsheet from Res that you're going to copy into. So having two monitors and keeping them separate is going to be really easy. For right now, I'm going to try to keep them separate on two different sides of the screen for you. So here I can look, and channels 1 through 11 and channels 15 and 16 I know are trunking because we've given them talk group IDs. And channels 12 through 14 are conventional because we can see they have frequencies here. So here under my first zone, I'm just going to hit that minus C, and I'm going to hit my plus minus C. And then for trunking, it was 1 through 11 and 15 and 16. And then I'm going to just hit this drop down to trunking and hit add. It's going to add those for me. And then I'm going to go 12 through 14 and hit add, and it's going to add those conventional channels. Oops. Delete that and add it. There. Now it added those conventional channels. So do we have any questions about that? I'm going to just go ahead and do these other zones real quick. If you got any questions, feel free to either use it in the chat or unmute and let me know. I'm going to go ahead and add my next zone here. My plus minus. This is the same. So I'm going to add my trunking now. There we go. And then next I'm going to go down to my third zone here, mutual aid zone. So I'm going to hit plus here. Add. And then I'm going to go one more zone. And this is all conventional. I'll just hit add. There we go. So now I'm just going to double check that I've got my zones configured that I want. Zone 4 is all conventional. Zone 3 is all trunking. Zone 2 is 1 through 11 trunking, 15 and 16. And zone 1 is the same. Okay. So I now have my template set up the way that I want. I'm going to go to File, Export parameters to Excel. Now you can select everything, but that's going to be a high noise to signal ratio, right? So what we want to do is just select what's interesting to us. So what's interesting to us would be our trunking list sets, and then our conventional channels and our trunking channels. I simply hit Export, and then it's going to ask me where I want to save it. I'm going to save it as training here. Yep, I want to replace it. And now they're successfully exported. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to open up my training spreadsheet. Here it is. And then let me just scooch this to the side. using my little plus minus down here to add to zoom. So now you can see where I have control channels, sites, and talk groups. And if you notice, there's a number 2 here. So if we go back to res and we go to our systems here, you see that I have a number 1 and a number 2. So if I had multiple systems like such, when it exported, I would have a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5. So let's go back to our export here. So here I've got my control channels for number 2. And you see how it's kind of cutting some of it off. So in Excel, we can resize the cells. So if we put our little selector here and we put it in between 2 columns, we see that we get a solid line with 2 arrows on either side. From there, we can click and drag to make a cell bigger or smaller, or we can double click it to size it automatically to fit. We can do the same with these cells up and down as well. So the easiest way to size the cells in a sheet is we're going to select this little triangle here, and that selects everything. And then we're going to go with our line with 2 arrows on either side. We're going to double click that. So now we've resized the whole sheet so that we can see what's going on. This doesn't affect how the software imports the spreadsheet. This just affects what it looks like to us to help us read it. So if we go to our source documentation here, we have a system tab. And here under the system tab, we have our system ID and our Wacom. And then we have a list of our available control channels. Simply put, I'm going to select the control channels. I'm going to right click and I'm going to select copy. After I've copied it, I'm then going to go over here to my destination, just select this cell, and I'm going to right click to paste. And under paste options, I always want to select either match destination formatting or just values. So here I've just imported the values. So there's my control channel list. So next I'm going to go to sites. So here my site alias listing here. You see I have alias, RFS ID, site ID, and system ID. So for alias, I'm going to select the aliases that I have. Right click, copy. Right click, paste values. And I'm going to go to RFSS, right click, copy. Right click, paste. Same thing with sites. Copy, paste. Now all of these sites are in the same system ID, so I can copy this cell down. So if you look at the cell that I've selected here, you'll see that there's a large, I'd say large, but there's a black box here at the bottom. And you see that when my cursor goes over that black box, it changes from an open plus sign to a filled in plus sign. So this filled in plus sign will allow me to fill values. So if I click and drag this down, it will fill these values. But you've noticed here it's incremented them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I don't want to increment them. I want to copy them. So if I go to this box here and I select down, I can either fill the series, which is what it did, or I can select copy cells. So now when I select copy cells, it sets them all to ones. The next thing I need to do is configure my talk group ID. And this is where things get kind of tricky. Because if I go back over here to my system information, I don't have any talk group ID information here. Where I get it from is my zone channel assignment. So here I can see zones, and I can see we've given an alias name and then an ID. But it's not organized in the way that I need to copy and paste over here. So we need to kind of like build ourselves a sandbox, if you will. So the first thing I'm going to do is, if you notice, my IDs here are hexadecimal values. And when we do an import, we don't want to import hexadecimal values. We want to import decimal values. So the first thing I do is I have to figure out how am I going to change all these hexadecimal values into decimal values. And what's great about Microsoft Excel is it's not just a program to organize tables. We can do lots of formatting and we can do lots of formulas to make the program work for you. When I joke when I train people about how to use Excel is, if the question is, can Excel do that? The answer almost 9 times out of 10 is yes. A simple Google search, like I want to make Excel make coffee. And I'm sure there's somebody that's got a tutorial that'll teach you how to make Excel make coffee. So what we're going to do is we're going to need to add an extra column. So I'm going to select the D column here and right click and go to Insert. So now you see I have a separate column in here. Then I'm going to make a formula that will transfer this value into a decimal value. So the way I do it is I select the cell and I type in equals and I type in hex, H-E-X, 2, the number 2, decimal, D-E-C. So now that is the command to convert hexadecimal to decimal. So the next thing I need to do is add a parentheses to tell it what I want to change. Then I'm going to select the cell that I want to change. So I want to convert this cell, C3, and then I finish the parentheses, and then I press Enter. So now I can see that the decimal equivalent of FF is 255. Now remember before when we selected this and we went to our little fill box here, so we got our filled in plus sign. If I click and drag this down, I'm going to drag it down all the way. What it does is it replicates that formula over and over again. So here in this cell, I can see the formula is hexadecimal, and then I want to do that next cell. So this is great. I've got all of my hexadecimal numbers now represented as a decimal number. But the problem is that when I do an import from Excel using res, I'm not going to be able to import the formula. I need the values. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select this whole column here. I'm going to right click, select copy, and then I'm going to paste right over the top of it. So I'm going to select that cell D1, right click, and then when I go to do paste, I'm going to just paste values. So now when I do that and I select the cell, now you can see the value is, say here, 255 instead of the formula that I had before. Are there any questions about that? We all good? So the next thing I need to do is make myself a sandbox. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to hit the little plus sign to create a new sheet. So I have a new sheet. I'm going to double click where it says sheet 1. I'm going to rename it talk group, so I know what's there. I'm going to go back to my zone channel assignment and I'm going to select all of column B and all of column D. I'm going to hit copy, just Control C, talk groups, paste. Boom, right here. I'm going to select it all like this so I can resize it. And then I don't need column B. That's the hexadecimal values. So I'm going to select column B, right click, and delete. Boom. I don't need the zone name here that says Salem. So I'm going to select that row, right click, delete. So now I've got to organize this to get the conventional stuff and the garbage out of the way. So I'm going to do that by selecting the column A and B. I'm going to go to data and I'm going to go to sort and filter. So here I want to sort. Make sure you have my data has headers, and then I want to sort by the talk group ID. So when I do this, here's all of the garbage. So I can select all the garbage, right click, delete, and I want to shift my cells up. There we go. And then if I go down here at the bottom, here's more garbage. I don't need that. Right click, delete. There we go. Now, if you notice, I've got some duplicates here, and I want to get rid of my duplicates. So the easiest way to get rid of duplicates is first, I'm going to highlight my ID range. I'm going to go to Home, Conditional Formatting, Highlight Cell Rules, and then I'm going to highlight duplicate values. And here, it automatically says that it's going to highlight it with a light red fill and a dark red text. You can make it whatever color you want, but I just go with the default and hit OK. So that easily identifies where I have duplicates. So here I can select the duplicate, right click, delete, shift cells up. I can select the duplicate, right click, delete. I can select the duplicate, right click, delete. And got these here, right click, delete. So now I don't have any more duplicates in my talk group listing. And so now I can then copy and paste this over to my talk group list. Simply to select the aliases and the IDs, right click, copy, select here, right click, paste. So there they're all here. But now I need to fill in the rest of the information for receive only, key, encryption, site, enable, so forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this first one, scroll across, and then I'm going to change to a solid plus sign, and I'm going to pull it down. Now you notice that when I pull it down, it increments those numbers. That's not what I want. So I'm going to go to my box here, and instead of fill series, I'm going to select copy cells. So now they're all copied. If we go back to our zone channel assignment, you may notice that a few talk groups have been marked to be secure, like CERT or the private channel. Now remember, secure and clear, that's like a selectable, right? It's an either or. And doing that import and export is very difficult because if I don't type in secure perfectly right here, then it's not going to do an import. And if it doesn't do the import, then I've got to figure out why it didn't do it and what went wrong. Where it's much easier to just go back in after the fact and change those after we've done the import. So now I've got my trunking list set complete. Are there any questions about how to do a trunking list set or how to import a trunking system? Great. Whenever you're doing a code plug, especially doing import export, I recommend that you break it into bite-sized chunks. Don't try to do it all at once. Do a little bit, perform an import, verify that it does what you want, and then move a little bit more down the line. Once you start doing everything at once, it makes it harder to find errors. But it's easy to do, especially once you develop some skills and get used to doing it. So the next thing I'm going to configure are my zones. So if I click on Zone 1 params, this is the parameters for the zones. And if you notice, the majority of these are on or offs. I ignore most of them. The big one that I do is the zone alias. So here, the first one is Salem. I'm just going to type that in instead of copy paste because that's really easy. Next, when I click on zone 1, you'll see here are all the configurations. We have the channels, whether they're trunking or conventional. If you have multiple trunking systems, you'll see the system number here, and then we have the alias and so forth. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the alias. I'm going to copy. I'm going to paste values. That's okay. Don't worry about it. What happened? There it goes. So now I've pasted in the values. So the next thing I want to do is I want to paste in my talk groups. So I'm going to select my talk groups and hit copy. But you notice the talk group information isn't here. We have to scroll past the conventional information until we reach the talk group information here. This is all the trunking information. So here I can select the talk group, right click, select paste, and paste the values. I don't need these zeros here, so I'm just going to select them and press delete on the keyboard. Next, I'm going to do my conventional channels. So I'm going to scroll all the way back. And here I have my conventional frequencies. So I'm going to just right click, copy, right click, paste values. Now here it says the receive PL type is CSQ. That's another abbreviation for carrier squelch or no PL tone. So for the RX code guard, I'm just going to keep that at none. Next, I'm going to select my transmit frequencies. So here I'll select the transmit frequencies, right click, copy. I'll scroll over to where I have my transmit frequencies here. I'll right click, paste. Now it says the PL type is just a PL tone of 156.7. So I'm going to select that PL tone, right click, copy, and then where it says transmit code guard, I'm going to select here, right click, paste values. That's it for zone 1. I'm going to go ahead and start doing zone 2. If you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to chime in and I'll talk through the process that I'm going. So first I'm going to click the zone params. Here I have my alias, so I'm going to change that. I can easily just select here, right click, copy, select here, right click, paste value. Next, I'm going to use my little scroll buttons here at the bottom to scroll over to zone 2. I go back over here, I'm going to select my aliases, right click, copy, select my aliases, right click, paste. Then I'm going to select my IDs. Right click, copy. And I'm going to scroll over. Talk group here. I'm going to right click, paste. There's my values. I can take those zeros out. Scroll back over. Now it's time to do conventional. Now I happen to know that these 3 conventional channels are identical to zone 1. So I can either copy and paste from here, or if I want to, I can back up to zone 1. I can select these rows, 1, 2, 3, right click, copy, then go back over here, select number 12, then right click, paste, and they're right in there, just the same. Now, if you're doing this, if you're copying channels from one zone to the next, you need to make sure that this channel listing here stays true. You don't want any duplicate numbers. You don't want them out of order. So you need to take care of that. But for the rest part, the rest of it's going to be just fine. I'm going to click on zone parameters 3. Click over here. We'll right click, copy. Select here, right click, paste. What I like most about this is this takes the fat fingers out of it. I'm not going to input a frequency wrong. I'm not going to input an ID wrong. If this doesn't work, it's because my source documentation had an error, not because of my process. Next, I'm going to select the aliases, copy, paste. Then I'm going to scroll over where the IDs go. Select, copy, paste values. There we go. That one's done. We got zone 4, last one, copy, paste. Now we click on zone 4 here. Now this is all conventional, so things are going to get crazy. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of the aliases, paste value, select all the receive frequencies, paste values. So here we have carrier squelch, and then we have DPL. So for DPL, we need to add a D first. So we need to input D043, D114, D212, D311, and D445. Now I can easily just hand type that in. But remember, what I love about this process is that I don't hand type things in. I don't leave myself open to making errors. So I'm going to use Excel to add the D for me. I'm going to select the I column, right click, insert. So I've got a little sandbox here to play with, put my formula. And then I'm going to select the cell. I'm going to write equals. So I want to add a D. So I'm going to do quotation mark, D, quotation mark. Then I'm going to use the ampersand. That's Shift 7. And I'm going to select the cell that I want to add. Just like that. So when I press enter, now you see my value is D043. And remember, I can copy formulas really easy if I select the cell, move my cursor until I have the filled in plus box, and then click and drag it down, just like so. Now I can't copy this and paste it over here because this is a formula. So I'm going to select this, right click, copy, and then I'm going to go to receive code guard for the county call. When I right click, I'm going to paste values. There I have values instead of the formulas, just like so. Next, we have our ground to air frequency, and it happens to be a digital frequency with a NAT code 1A2. So that's a hexadecimal number. And if I scroll over, here under the NAT codes, you see that their hexadecimal numbers are listed because there's a $sign first. So I need to input $1A2. Now I can easily come back over here and I can say, for example, equals quotation mark, $, quotation mark, ampersand, and the value. Or I could even, just because it's 1, I could probably type it in over there and be safe. So I'm going to hit copy. Then I'm going to go to NAC here, right click, and paste value. And there it is, 1A2. Now you notice my setting here is analog, and because that's an on-off feature, I'm going to have to do that after I do the import. So it's a great idea to have yourself a piece of notebook paper to take notes down on things you're going to have to do after the import. So right now, after the import, I'm going to have to make sure that I do my security settings properly on my talk groups, and I'm going to have to make sure that I change this frequency to a digital instead of an analog frequency. So I've got my notes down that I'm making sure I'm going to make those changes appropriately when it's time. Now it's time for the transmit frequency. Now you notice here the weather frequencies, they're going to be receive only. I don't want to transmit on those frequencies, so we're going to set the frequency value to 0. And that makes it a receive only. Here I've got a PL tone of 156.7, so I'm going to copy that. Under transmit code guard, I'm going to put that there. I've got a transmit DPL. Because I know that these DPLs are exactly the same as these, I'm just going to copy these over here. But you could easily make your own little sandbox over here and do that. Oh, forgot to do values. There it goes. And lastly is this guy for the NAC code values. There we go. So now I've copied and pasted all the information I need to from my source documentation to my spreadsheet here. So obviously I'm going to go up here and I'm going to hit save. We want to save it and then we need to close it because Windows doesn't like it when you have two pieces of software trying to access the same file. It can create some issues. So here I'll close it. I'll open back up Res. I'm going to go to File, Import, Import Parameters from Excel. Select the spreadsheet that I want to import. And then here it gives me a list of what do I want to import. So I don't have to import everything. So if you've got large statewide systems, you can make big templates that has everything in it. And then when it's time to do an import, just like at a restaurant, you can say, I want this zone, and that's it. So again, like I said, I recommend that you do imports in little bite-sized pieces to make sure that it went right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to import the trunking list set. I'm going to hit next. And now it's telling me, where do you want this list set to be assigned? So if I had more than one trunking system, when I hit this drop down, there would be more than one trunking system listed here. So I want to assign this to trunking system number 2. And then always make sure that you have checked remove current list set entries. Otherwise, that's going to append to the end of the list and can make things messy. I'm going to hit next, finish, and just like that, it's done. I can check my work by selecting the trunking system. I can go to the control channels. Yes, they are there. I can go to the talk group listing. Yes, it's there. This would be a great time to make sure that I have my encryption settings set. So I can go back to my source documentation. We can scroll up and we can say, okay, what's secure? Let's see here. Salem cert is secure with key number 1. So here's Salem cert. And I'm going to select secure there. Let's go back here. Let's see. And it looks like the Salem private is also secure, and it has key number 3. So here's Salem private. I'm going to set that to secure, and I'm going to set that to key number 3. And then if I go down here, I've got the Franklin cert. I believe it's secure. Let's see here. Yep. And it uses key number 1. So Franklin cert. Let's make that a little bigger so we can see it. There it is, Franklin cert. We're going to make that secure using key number 1. And looks like the Franklin private here, I think it's also secure. It is, and it uses key number 2. So I'm going to go to the Franklin private, change that to secure, change that to key number 2. There we go. Took care of that. There's the rest of them. It all looks good. Close that window. Let's look at our sites. Yep, our sites imported just fine. So now I know that my trunking list set imported just fine. So the next thing I want to do is I want to import my zone channel assignment. Please take note, right now our code plug has 4 zones, 64 channels. So when I go to File, Import parameters from Excel, I can select the same spreadsheet. And here I'm going to hit Select All, but unselect the trunking list sets because I don't need that anymore. I'll hit Next. Uh-oh, it says there's an error parsing sheet zone 4, row 7. I'll hit OK. I'll go back. Let's open up our spreadsheet. So it said, oh, not this one. This one. So it said zone 4, row 7, there was an issue. We can't find it. See if it likes this instead. D43. Try here. D43. See if it likes that. We'll hit save. I'll minimize it. I don't want to minimize it. I'm going to close it. Let's try that import again. So I go File, Import, Parameters from Excel, select my file. I have my zones. Hit Next. It still doesn't like it. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to open it back up. I'm going to go to zone 4. So right here, I'm going to just hit copy on none. And I'm going to paste this over the DPL tones. Like such. Oh, I see what happened. I put it on the invert instead of here. That's why I didn't like it. Hold on. Let's back up. I'm using Control Z to back up. We're going to change that back to D043. What a knucklehead. Select this. I'm going to hit copy. I'm going to paste it where it's supposed to go. And then for this off, I'm going to click and drag that down just to copy the off. There we go. Let's save this. Close it. Let's try to do a file import now. So here you can see why it's important to do little pieces at a time because it'll help you identify the errors if you see any. You can see also where the import wizard will tell you exactly where your error is. So if it was in that zone 4 and I couldn't figure it out, I could just choose not to import that zone and do that manually if I got frustrated. But this should work now. Hit next, next, finish, and boom. If you notice here, instead of 4 zones, I now have 8, and I now have twice as many channels. So if I click on my zone channel assignment, and I click my drop down, you'll see that I have the 4 that I had as my template, and then the 4 that I imported were added at the end. So I'm just going to simply select zone 1, hit delete zone. Yes. I'll do this a couple more times. And now you can see here's my Salem zone. I have my dispatch. I have this information. If I click on my conventional, you'll see the conventional information came through. So remember, we've got to change some frequencies in our backup zone. I'm just going to go ahead and QC the rest. Make sure it came through. Mutual aid. Yep. They all came through. And my backup. Yep. And there's even my DPL tones came through when you put them in the right spot. So remember our ground to air, this one is going to be digital. So I'm going to go to receive mode, select digital. And then here on transmit mode, I'm going to select digital. And there we go. So this code plug for the most part is complete. There's still some things that you need to do. You need to still configure your menus. You should probably still configure your buttons. I could normally go into global, conventional, configure my display for my conventional and trunking. But these are all selected from a dropdown, and it's much easier to use the Res UI than it is to use import export with Excel. Are there any questions about how to make a code plug using Microsoft Excel? Great. That's all I have for you guys today. If you have any questions whatsoever on any topic under the sun, feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to answer.
On your import, whenever you have your various things on the global and whatnot, if you export that and it doesn't need to be edited, but you're programming new radios, you could build that and then copy it from the Excel spreadsheet, right?
That's correct. So, for example, if I've got a standardized button or menu configuration, I can go here. Let me just do I'm just going to grab a couple of things at random. They probably make no sense at all. And then I'm going to go here. I'm going to set some buttons up just for gee whiz, right? So if I have a standardized button configuration that I like, and I want my whole fleet to have that button configuration, what I can do is after I've got my buttons and menus configured, I can go to File, Export Parameters to Excel. And then what I recommend that you do is I recommend that you select trunking programmable buttons, conventional buttons, trunking main menu, conventional main menu. If you're using keypad programming, you select the conventional programming menu, and then select Export. And then here you can title it like menus and buttons, for example, and then hit save. So that's exported successfully. So then now what I can do is if I have a brand new code plug that I'm doing, so if I go new portable VHF, right? So this is a brand new from scratch portable code plug, and I want to have it's just for testing, right? So I just want my mutual aid, my backup in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File, Import. I'll import my buttons and menus first. I just hit Select All, Next, Next, Next. I then go to File, Import. I may not have liked it because I didn't do the trunking stuff first. We'll see. Add a trunking system. Doing this a little too fast. Let's back up a little. Let's redo that import. So it doesn't hurt anything. Just do the import right back on top. So I'm going to do all these buttons and menus. And then I'm going to go File, Import. I'm going to import all of this, except nope, I just want my mutual aid and my backup. That's it. That's all I want. I hit Next. I want that list set on that system. Hit Next and Finish. I can go to Zone. I delete zone number 1. Boom. So now here's my backup, and here's my mutual aid. And if I want my mutual aid to go first, I can go Zone Settings. Where it says Zone Index, I just bump that to number 1. So now I have mutual aid and backup. If I go to menus, and I scroll to the top, there's all the menus that I did. If I go to buttons, there's the buttons that I did. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
No worries. Any other questions? Anything else I can do for you guys? Awesome. Thanks for attending this training. Next week, we'll be focusing on keypad programming, the KNG and KNG2. And then in June, we're going to start the same training classes over again. We'll start with conventional programming, trunking programming, import, export with Excel, and finish up with keypad programming next month. This training here has been recorded and it will be published on YouTube. You can go to our YouTube channel at BK Technologies, and you can see all of the other previous trainings that we've done here as well. Thanks for everybody attending, and I'll catch you next time.